Hey, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Your Handmade Business Television. My surroundings are looking a little bit different today. That is because I am coming to you live from the thriving metropolis of Stevenson, Virginia. It's very fancy here. And Sharon, of course, is in her normal place in LA proper. Anyway, we are Isaac Watson, that's me, and Sharon Fain, my crafty co-conspirator. We are the directors of Academy of Handmade, a supportive community for makers. And each week we tackle a topic on Your Handmade Business Television that we think gets deeper into what's really going on in your business. And we talk about all things maker life.
Hashtag.
Hashtag. So this week, we are talking about 5 tips for awesome line sheets. And I think you're going to like them. Last week we talked about developing a relationship with a printer. If you missed that last week, you can click over on the schedule button here in Crowdcast and go back to week 1. Where you can watch the replay. And of course
Don't click now because
don't click now.
Take you away from us.
That's right.
You're like, what's going on?
Yeah, don't do it later. If you have any questions about the topic today, we would love to know what they are, and we'd love to try and answer them. So you can use the Ask a Question button below the video there. We also have a poll where we would love to know what you struggle the most with regarding wholesale with your maker business. And if you missed us last month, that's because we weren't here doing YHB TV. We were doing a live version of our Jumpstart program. That is our signature program where we dive into the nitty-gritty of your business. And just so you know, if you feel like you're at a point where you're ready to sort out exactly what's happening in your business, dive into your numbers, and get some clarity about what you're doing, we highly encourage you to check it out. What am I missing, Sharon? I know what I'm missing. Some of you are already introducing yourself in the chat, which is fantastic. We would love for more of you to introduce yourself in the chat so we can see who you are and who you're from. I see Allie, who I know from Portland. I met her at an event a little over a year ago, I think. And I've got some other Jessica's in here from J-Star Jewelry, who we know, and several other people that we know too. Keisha's here, of course. Hello, Nancy and Bonnie and Rhonda, and all you other fine people. What else? What else am I missing, Sharon?
I was just going to say that most of you are probably coming in because you know us from the Facebook group. But if you're not in the Facebook group, we also have a Your Handmade Business Facebook group that we'd love for you to join. And I was also going to just say that last week, I think the session topic on printing, I think, was really meaty, and we got into a lot of good stuff in there. So
we ended that, and I remember texting you and going, "Wow, that ended up really good." Part of it is because Sharon and I both have a lot of experience dealing with printers in past lives, and we have lots of stories to tell. And it was a little bit longer than our normal episode, but it was, if I do say so myself, it was pretty juicy.
Yeah, no, I think if you're thinking about working with a printer, or this is something that you're doing right now, I would really encourage you to listen, even if you didn't watch, because I think there's a lot of stuff in there that applies to working with all kinds of vendors. So, for sure.
All right. So today, as we said, we have 5 tips for you on how to have killer line sheets. If you aren't familiar with what a line sheet is, it's basically a tool that helps your wholesale customers review all the products that you have to offer so that they can then place an order. So it's usually used in conjunction with a catalog and an order form. If you get so fancy as to having a catalog. But a lot of makers will just have a line sheet and an order form. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. And Sharon, I'm going to let you kick us off.
Sure. So the first thing we have to say about line sheets, first of all, if you're working on a line sheet or anything like that, or you have questions about them, ask below or let us know in the chat what's going on. We'd love feedback, especially, or if you have your own tips as well too. One of the things I was going to say though about a line sheet and what we see that like makers get hung up on, or sort of like the biggest thing, is that they forget with a line sheet that it is function over form, which is to say the beauty of the line sheet is not as important as the function of the line sheet, I guess. Obviously you want things laid out well and everything, but the fact of it is it's an easy way for people to order from you, and it's not about the marketing sort of like fancy words and like stories behind everything. Like the point of it is for people to order from you, and not it's not a pitch, basically. So that is basically the catalog. The catalog is the place where you see all the pretty pictures and like, you know, you tell the story of the pieces and all of that sort of thing that you might need to do. There's not lots of different varieties of photos, putting your, you know, showing your products and stuff. A line sheet is like, I've already been sold. Basically, I want to order. How do I figure out the ordering process, right? And especially if you have a lot of stuff for people to order from, a line sheet can get really confusing to buyers, and you don't want to confuse buyers, because if they're confused, then that means it's harder for them to order, right? So you want to make it as easy as for them to understand what they're buying. It doesn't have to be done by a professional designer, though that said, if you want to have a professional designer do it, that's fine. Actually, there's a couple links that we have, I think, to Lucky Break Consulting. Leela does a template that you can just download yourself and fix and do up however you want. And then also she has a whole VIP package on it if you want to go through that. But so we recommend Leela for all things wholesale, and she has 2 of those resources, but you don't have to go through a professional designer. There's lots of things where you can just Google the template online and figure out how to lay it out yourself. So, you know, it doesn't have to be as complicated as that, but I know some people are very much more like, my design skills, or, you know, even just opening whatever. So don't worry about that. A lot of retailers like to sort of print these things out and sort of go through and mark things up. And even if they're not, even if their final purchase is going to be through some sort of online portal, the physical line sheet itself is helpful too. So it doesn't have to be in a fancy format, like issue or anything like that. Again, the main point is that somebody can print it out. Even it being in color, in terms of like having like photographs of it, like if you're familiar with the fashion industry at all, like a lot of that is just like their line sheets are just the sort of like outline sketch of the product, and then like color swatches in there to choose the color. So just realize that this is not something that has to be like incredibly fancy. I don't know how else to say that, but like don't let fancy get in the way of the function.
Exactly. And I think as you'll see as we go through these, we're really hoping to help you strip away a lot of the anxiety around creating a line sheet, because we hear time and time again from makers how stressful and complicated this process can be, and it really doesn't need to be. So just to reiterate what Sharon said, function over form, keep it useful and keep it practical. The extra layers of the fancy design and things like that's kind of icing on the cake, but you can't just eat icing. You got to have some cake too. And we all like cake. So with that said, I think that dovetails really nicely with our second big tip, which is related to the common question that we see, and we've seen this recently in our Facebook group, is that people are always wanting to know what the best program is to use to create a line sheet. And the answer is, the tip is, create it in a way that makes sense to you. Because a line sheet is something that you're going to need to update regularly as your products change, as your size selection or your colors change or whatever it is. So you need to be able to update it easily and put it together in a way that's not going to require you to learn how to use Adobe InDesign or whatever it is. Find the software that is the most comfortable for you right now and start with that. And then if you want to graduate to something later, if you want to decide to add a bunch of icing to the cake and have it professionally designed, then that's fine, you can. But don't sweat learning an entirely new software program just to create a line sheet.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think a lot of people sort of get hung up on I'm going to have to figure out how to use Adobe products or whatever for this, and not necessarily the case to do that.
No, I mean, some people use Canva, some people use, I've seen Excel spreadsheets that have images dropped into them. I've seen Airtable. We love ourselves some Airtable. I've seen PowerPoint presentations as line sheets. I mean, there's so many different ways that you can do it. So you just need to find what works for you, what you're comfortable with, and go from there. And then the kind of follow-up on that would be that if you really don't know how to create the layout for your line sheet, look into buying a template for a line sheet and then tweaking it to suit your needs. So, some people have different visual skills versus technical skills. So if you're like, well, I know how it needs to look, but I don't know how to set it up right in whatever program I'm using, even if you're comfortable with that program, you can use a template or you can find one online to download that could work to suit your needs if you just tweak it a little bit. And a lot of times starting with a template lays the groundwork, and then you can really dive into customize that.
Totally. The next one was going to be, don't necessarily worry about it having it be perfect the first time. So this is not to say that you want it to have it, good. Again, function is the main thing here. But don't get hung up on perfection on it. That I think one of the things that you'll probably start to notice with it is once actually people start using it, the usability factor becomes apparent. So one way to do it is to just do it and then start to use it and then make revisions on it. Another is to do it and then if you have some stores that you trust, to just run it by them for some feedback. So all of that is, again, we're such big advocates of not having you guys get hung up on it being completely perfect. And especially, like we said, the line sheet is not something that has to be a thing of beauty. It should be a thing of easy for people to order from you. So that is tip number 3.
Yeah, I would add to that that it's probably more beneficial to get a shop owner's feedback, someone who's actually doing the ordering, who's actually looking at these line sheets from a shop owner's perspective, over peer maker feedback.
Totally. And I would say that, yeah.
Go ahead.
And I would say that is a lot of times because even if you were to, we mentioned templates, those are great, but even thinking about getting a template from Etsy, you should still try to version it a little too, because every maker business is so different and their lines are so different, and how that should sort of get set up in their business should be different. And that's the thing that's hard about a line sheet is because there's no one perfect answer that fits everybody, it's hard for people to sort of am I doing it right? Right. And so a shop will tell you better than another maker if you're doing it right for your business, because the other maker is mostly only going to know their business.
Exactly. So I've always been a huge fan of what some people refer to as iterative process or iterative selling, which is the notion that you kind of run things like software versions. So you may have heard of the term of a minimum viable product or an MVP. So you start with like your core basic minimum, and then you just iterate on that, and you create a new version and a new version and a new version. You can do that with your line sheets. And you have the added benefit of being able to stay in regular contact with your wholesalers, because every time you have a new version, you can reach out and say, hey, just wanted to send you the updated line sheet, call your attention to the new products or the changes in these products. Oh, and by the way, I've noticed that you haven't reordered in a while. What can I do for you? How are things selling? That's perfect opportunity to follow up with people. So that's kind of an added bonus.
Totally.
Okay, so that was tip number 3. Don't worry about having it absolutely perfect the first time. Tip number 4. Consistency, consistency, consistency. When I say consistency, I mean consistency in how you name your products, how you label them, how you name your styles and price things. This is where that crystal clear information is hugely helpful. You want to make it as easy as possible for your wholesale accounts to order your stuff. And that means they need to understand what they're seeing very, very clearly. So that comes down to naming conventions. You should probably create a consistent way of naming your product and style across your entire product range. Same would go for size range consistency. If you're doing, accessories and you have, a small, medium, and large scarf or something. I'm totally making this up as I go, and it may not make sense. But you should make sure that you are using small, medium, and large across the majority of your sized accessories where possible. You want to make sure that the language you use and the information you convey is easy to digest and helps keep your wholesale accounts from getting overwhelmed by looking at it. So if you've got tons and tons of information condensed into this like tightly packed, it's going to be really hard for them to tell what they're reading. So if you can spread things out over a couple pages or really focus on that core information that they would need to be able to place an order, that's going to help you a lot. The last thing I was going to add on that note is if you do have a catalog as well, I would recommend that you make sure everything in your line sheet reconciles with the product naming in the catalog and vice versa. So as they're looking at the catalog and they, dog ear it or whatever to come back to it later, that the name of that product that's listed there is going to be the exact same thing that product is called in your line sheet.
Yes, totally. Which kind of leads into, which is like form over function, but basically stick to the facts. It's about ordering with a line sheet. So the lifestyle photos, the extra verbiage, it's just going to weigh everything down and distract it. Like that stays in the catalog. So because it's a tool to facilitate ordering, you're going to want that. But one of the things that you should think about in there, though, is if you're trying to help someone order, that means you want to make sure that you have everything in there that includes like, what are your best sellers? What is new? What might qualify to make a starter pack if you do that? What might qualify? What is your opening minimum? What is your reorder minimum? All of those things are, facts, just the facts. Like, what are your return policies, shipping policies, payment policies? All of that stuff should be on there so that when people order, they totally, think of it, it's kind of like a contract between you and whoever, the buyer, right? And so this is sort of like you're presenting them with the contract for them to pick how they want it to go and then sign the contract basically when they place the order. So if you don't have things right on your end, then it's easier for them to say, "Ooh, that you never said that," or that wasn't in the ordering process. So make sure that that's all in there so that they really understand what they're getting into, and leave out the fluff. It's not the time to, you've already done this elsewhere. They're basically already sold on your products, so you don't need to keep selling them. You want them to now move to checkout.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, so let's do a quick recap of the 5 tips. Number 1, function over form. It's got to be useful more than it needs to be beautiful. Number 2, create it in a way that makes sense to you and is easy for you to update. Tip number 3, don't worry about having it absolutely perfect the first time. Tip number 4, consistency, consistency, consistency. And number 5, stick to the facts. All right, we have a bonus resource that we wanted to put in here from Indie Retail Academy on how to create a line sheet that makes selling easy. That could be a good thing for you to check out, especially if you are just starting.
Oops.
What was that?
I was trying to post the thing and I posted something else instead, whatever was in.
Awesome.
We also have a few questions, and
Excellent.
one of the questions is Sarah asked, will you be showing some visual examples of line sheets, or do you know a good online resource for viewing some line sheets or order forms? That Indie Retail Academy post that we just posted has it. As we mentioned, Leela Barker has her line sheets as well too. If you want to, if those links, those links already go in, Isaac?
Yes, I put them in already.
For creating line sheets too. I mean, if you just Google template, like, line sheet template, and then say specifically, your industry too, a lot of stuff will come up. So again, it's one of those things where there's like a lot to see out there. And it's more about adapting to you and what makes the most sense for you as well too. So Yeah, if I can add to that, I would caution you against looking at too many examples. It's useful to figure out what information you need, but the more samples of awesome line sheets that you look at, the more you're going to feel like you need to overproduce your line sheet. And the more you're going to start comparing yourself to other businesses. Every maker business is unique. And so that means every maker business's line sheet is going to be unique. So part of why we did not explicitly show you examples of line sheets today is because we're hoping that with our tips, we can strip down some of that anxiety and the expectation that we tend to generate around ourselves for creating the most amazing thing ever, and just get down to brass tacks and make a line sheet, and then be able to adapt it and tweak it from there. And then say, oh, what's missing off of this? What's going to, keep someone from ordering? What's going to mess up my ordering process and how it makes sense to me? It's a tool for communication between you and the buyer. So that's what it is more than it is, fancy branding.
Exactly. Okay. Another question from Nancy. Nancy says, when providing a line sheet for a trade show, not necessarily perfect either, correct? So I think the question is, does a trade show line sheet need to be perfect from the get-go?
I would say your trade show line sheet, this kind of goes back on what we were not saying necessarily, but I think your trade show line sheet, because you do not have as much opportunity to correct it as much on the spot or go back and iterate, should be as perfect as possible. Like, by the time you're getting to trade show land, a few buyers should have already seen your line sheet, and you should have made your corrections, I guess, is what I'm saying. Like, the perfectness that we're talking about is don't let perfect keep you from. Don't make perfect, make this process make you, insane over, the details, and don't make perfect be the thing that keeps you from just, putting one out and making it as best as you can. But I think for a trade show, because you don't have as much ability to go back and iterate, you should try to have it as down pat as possible.
Yeah. I was armchair observing the experience of a maker friend of ours, Christine Heidel, in Seattle, who's a jeweler, and she was getting ready to go to a big trade show across country. And so she was prepping her line sheets and everything. And she was up against a press deadline, and it was going. She'd been working with a designer to make sure it was all branded and everything. And she was up really late doing a final revision. And it wasn't until she got the line sheets back that she realized that there was a mistake. But there's nothing you can do. And ultimately, it was a relatively minor thing. It was a typo. And I don't remember exactly whether it was a typo in price or a typo in the text, but
hopefully not the price.
well, but even if it is a typo in the price, let's say it was, it's not the end of the world, because you could, as you're waiting for the trade show to open, start hand correcting it, or
put stickers over it or something.
Stickers over it. There are plenty of solutions to get around that, and so it's not the end of the world if that happens. And at the same time, I would say that to what Sharon was saying, be careful about your perfectionism on things, because they can ultimately lead to oversights. If you're up until the wee hours and you're doing your final proofread during the wee hours, you're more likely to miss things than you are if you're doing it on a full night's sleep and whatnot. Anyway, so in the world of proofreading and editing, you can't be 100% perfect on everything. There's always going to be a mistake, and you're going to have to deal with it.
Okay. The next question from Allie Morgan. Do you think it's better to have a line sheet with only pictures and price, or pictures, price, and small descriptions of the item? I've seen both versions. When you say small description of the item, I think the main descriptions of the item should be like the size it's in, the style number, like price, MSRP, wholesale, all of that kind of stuff. If it's about like more about the item than what I don't know, maybe you can help me out with what I'm trying to say here, Isaac.
I think it goes back to getting rid of the fluff. So your line sheet shouldn't include marketing language. That's what your sales information is for. So you want to have the facts, you want to have the materials, you want to have the core pricing, the SKUs, things like that. But I wouldn't worry about a narrative description of the item per se. I would focus on what's it made of. Maybe you put
the product.
the name of the product. Maybe you have care instructions.
Carrot top or whatever.
Yeah. Focus on the facts.
Yeah. Jessica said in the comments, a super concise list of materials, ingredients is good to have. I list the metals and gemstones in each of my designs with the picture and ordering info for each. Yes, perfect. Exactly. That's what I was trying to say. Like relevant descriptions, yes. For buying, like what are they gonna get out of this? Ingredient list type things, not like the story behind the thing or whatever.
For sure. And I would say make sure you add anything that is often confused. So like in the case of Jessica, the actual metals and gemstones. So it may look like it's sterling silver, but maybe it's actually silver plate. So that's a huge difference, right? Or it may look like one gemstone, but it's actually another. So just that kind of clarifying information that really helps your buyer understand what they're actually buying is going to lead to many more successful orders down the road and far fewer returns or confusion.
Yeah. And obviously, depending on what you have, like that makes more sense for some objects than others, right? Some things aren't going to have ingredients or materials that matter as much.
Exactly. Okay, it looks like we have another question that just came in from Erica. She says, I have catalogs as well as a line sheet. However, the catalogs are printed and smaller for ordering purposes. In this situation, is it bad to include additional inserts into my catalog so I can pass those out with the new products that are not in the catalog versus handing out my line sheet that is not in a catalog form and would be printed out on paper in landscape form? So it sounds like you've got catalogs that are already printed, but maybe you're adding new items to your line that aren't included in the catalog. So the question is, are inserts okay? And versus just having those new products in the line sheet. I don't know about you, Sharon, but I would say that having an insert in a catalog with new product information is not a bad idea, especially if it is part of a new collection or I think economizing there is totally fine. I don't think you need to like go and revamp your entire catalog, scrap all the ones you printed, and then print a new one. That seems a little over the top to me.
The only thing that starts to get worrying, I think, is if you have stuff in the catalog that is no longer relevant. That's when I think you can get confusing. Like if that catalog has like some major, like if the catalog is like, here are all my staples, and then you're like, well, here's my special holiday stuff that goes into that's not my staples or whatever, or like, special for spring, whatever, like that totally makes sense. But if you have stuff that's like, no longer relevant really, that you're not carrying, or that you have to like make too many, like, actually we don't have this one, blah, 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 like do that too much, then it's probably going to be more confusing to people and you should just get a new one.
Yeah. If you're dealing, like if your catalogs are super expensive to print, or you just have way too many on hand, you could consider doing like a discontinued sticker or something and hand placing those in all the actual catalog as kind of an interim solution. But I would not, I guess, getting back to your question, I wouldn't rely solely on a line sheet to include your new products, because that's the second step in a buyer's process. First, they're going to look at your catalog to get sold on what fits in their store. Then they're going to look at the line sheet, and they may just gloss over anything that's new that they didn't see in the catalog, and that's a missed opportunity.
Yeah. Okay, so we took a poll at the beginning of all of this, and it was, what do you struggle with the most? By far, people said approaching stores, which I'm not totally surprised by, because I feel like this is usually a big introvert group. It's usually a big, I don't like to be salesy group. And so, approaching stores is usually pretty difficult, I think.
Which is funny that line sheets only got one vote in the episode that we have dedicated to line sheets, and yet there are so many people watching.
Yeah.
Maybe that's the second most.
Maybe it is the second most. Yeah.
Second biggest struggle.
I was gonna say approaching stores. We always do like to recommend Leela and Wholesale Matchmaker too as well. If you ever find approaching stores and finding new stores difficult as well, she's good people.
Yeah, and I think on the approaching stores, and maybe this might be an interesting future episode for us too, Sharon, but I think it's really for me. I mean, I am a more introverted person as well. I hate sales. Anytime I've been in a sales type position, it's not gone very well. But what I've learned over the years is that it's really about becoming comfortable with the story of your work and your business, and knowing that so deeply and internally that it is easy for you to talk about. And then as you're approaching new stores, that comes through in your conversations, and the whole process of finding stores to approach, like that's a whole different thing. But I think just that putting yourself out there and making that connection with people, it is really challenging for a lot of makers. But it is so important. It is so important.
Yes. All right. Well, we have run over again because that's just how things are lately here. Lots of good questions and everything. So thank you guys so much for joining us. Next week, we are going to talk about surprise press, how to drop everything with style, which is us discussing what happens when you all of a sudden get an opportunity coming your way, and you don't want to miss this opportunity. How do you make the most of it? So that is where we are going to be at next week. Same time, same place.
I'll be in a different place.
Oh, except for Isaac.
I'll be back home in Portland.
Yes. Except for Isaac, back in his always place. Thanks, guys, so much. We hope to see you in the Facebook group. Bye, guys.
Bye.